My dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, today we are going on Periscope Depth. You know, my podcast name is Periscope Depth. And when I was listening to Pink Floyd in late 80s with my classmates, I wouldn't believe if someone told me that in years I will be having Roger Waters on my podcast. Roger, welcome to the show. Thank you so much. You found some time for me. And how are you doing?
I'm all right. Yeah. I forgot I was talking to you today, as I told you before. Yeah. But I'm very glad I am. I like doing interviews, and I've done quite a few across this invisible barrier between us in the West and you in Russian Federation. So I probably will drop the F-bomb from time to time because that's the way I speak. I apologize for that in advance if any of your audience are sensitive to the to oaths. But whatever you've got to throw at me, I'm happy to answer it. I never prepare anything for an interview. When people say, we'll send you questions in advance, I say, I don't want to see them. I'm not interested in that. I have nothing to hide. I'm in a state of trepidation and misery and pain every day because of Gaza particularly. Pain because of Gaza. I got this thing from a friend of mine, Martin Goldschmidt, his name is, and he's the CEO of the record company that released my last record, which is Dark Side of the Moon Redux. And he stepped into the breach when I was dropped by my German record company, BMG, Bertelsmann Music Group, because a man from America called Jonathan Greenblatt accused me of being an anti-Semite and ordered Bertelsmann back into their cage to do his bidding, and they did, which is pretty incredible. They dropped me like a hot brick. So anyway, Martin picked up the cudgels. He has a label in England called Cooking Vinyl, but he sent me this morning a fantastic thing. I won't read it all to you, but I'll tell you what it is. Mm-hmm. Because it's long. It is, and he sent me, it's the will of Yahya Sinwar, who we all watched throwing that stick at the Israeli drone the other morning with his last breath. And just the first few words, he says, I am Yahya, the son of the refugee who turned exile into a temporary homeland and turned the dream into an eternal battle. As I write these words, I recall every moment that has passed in my... And it goes on for page after page after page. And it's one of the most moving documents that I've ever read in my life. I'm getting quite emotional now because I only read it 5 minutes ago or 10 minutes ago. But it's such a remarkable document. And it fits so perfectly with the images that we have of this man, this great hero of the People's Revolution in Palestine. And oh my God, what a wonderfully tragic mistake of the Israelis to release that drone footage of his last moments and show his extreme act of heroism at the end of the day. So anyway, I blurt that out to you now because that en passant is filling my heart and soul just for these few moments this day, though I confess there's nearly always something. And you mentioned our friend Scott Ritter earlier. So, all our concerns, obviously, about Ukraine and the possibilities of nuclear war and all that fills a lot of my brain space and my time as well. But we can get on to that. I'll stop talking. Good morning.
Yeah. By the way, I heard today our mutual friend Scott Ritter, who was talking to Judge Napolitano just about him, and Scott said those words which struck me. He said, "He went down fighting,"
Yep.
and the world watching a man going down fighting is a
Yep.
very powerful thing, is a hell of a thing. That means you didn't bring this man down. In fact,
Yeah.
just like you didn't bring the idea of this man
Yeah.
down, which
Exactly. That's
makes
what he's.
one man
Yes.
dies and thousands come into his place.
Yep.
That's how I
Yeah.
see it. In fact, Roger,
Somebody should have told Zelensky this before the incursion into Kursk. You cannot try and steal another people's land, because we saw it in 1943 when the other lot invaded Kursk, the Kursk region. Let us not forget the Wehrmacht. And so if people didn't learn the lesson during the Second World War,
looks like it.
then they're a bit dim. They're very, very slow learners. And obviously, the leaders in the West are criminally insane. Criminally insane. Every single one of them. The election that's coming up on November the 5th is just a short episode of the tragedy that is the hegemony of the evil empire, of which is the United States of America and all its acolytes and vassals. There, I've said it again, you arseholes. So I would be inspired by Sinwar, except my life isn't on the line. Maybe it is, who knows? You never know with these people, which way they're going to jump next.
Exactly.
But like the Russian people in the Second World War, I am going down fighting, like Yahweh Sinwar as well, because I live by a moral compass. There is right and wrong. Or I believe that to be absolutely true. It's something I learned from my parents, from my father and my mother. And I will carry it to my grave, and I've tried to teach it to my children. And hopefully we can pass this ball on to future generations. There is right and there is wrong. And the ideas of right and wrong, by and large, this is the conclusion I've come to from the reading and writing, the reading mainly that I've done in my life. You could say that a lot of it is enshrined in those 30 articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights from the 9th of December or 10th of December, whenever it was, in 1948 in Paris. And that if we, the peoples of the world, were to subscribe to those 30 articles and to obey them and to enshrine them in universal, well, they're already enshrined in universal law, but a lot of the big bullies in the world, like the United States of America, do not sign up to universal law. They're not signatories to the Treaty of Rome. They don't believe in human rights or freedom or democracy or any of the things that they pretend to. And in consequence, as Scott Ritter will agree with me, we're that close to not being here. We're that close to World War III. And they are completely ignoring it just because they want to be more powerful and more wealthy. And that, in a nutshell, is our dilemma. Isn't it?
Roger, you see, I was a Soviet kid. I was born in early 70s, 1973, and I remember life in the Soviet Union since I was 3 years old. And when the Soviet Union ceased to exist, I was already a grown man, young man. I was nearly 18. So I do remember how peoples of Soviet Union lived together. There was no a sign of difference between lots of nations of Soviet Union, and there was real peace inside the country. I do have memories of things which I didn't like, by the way, but there was so much of good there. And would you tell me, how did you see Soviet Union of 70s and 80s? Because I did learn your mother's philosophy. I call it philosophy. Just read, think over, do the heavy lifting, and then do the right thing, which I try to teach my children, by the way. And we didn't have technology then, and the information was limited. How did you learn about Soviet Union, and how did you see the Soviet Union in 70s and 80s? Can you remember that?
Well, I was a bit busy, but having said that, you're the same age as Dark Side of the Moon, 1973.
Yeah.
So, so my mother, I think my mother joined the Communist Party in 1938. I think she came from a very middle class English sort of commercial background. Her father was regular army, and then he was a businessman. He ran a company, and he only left the army ever. My grandfather, Lieutenant Colonel Robert White, DSOMC. He fought in the Boer War and through the First World War and blah blah, but he was the youngest of three brothers, and both his brothers drowned in an accident. They drowned in the River Wharfe in Yorkshire, and suddenly he had to leave the army and take over the family business, which was a tragedy in his life because he was very happy being a soldier, you know. And I've no idea. I have no comment about that because I wasn't there at that. So my mother, this is all quite well known, but my mother got something of an education in a girls' boarding school, and she decided to become a school teacher, and so she did teacher training. And then her first job for the end of her education as a teacher, she did teacher training experience in a northern town in England called Bradford, which is way up north in Yorkshire, and it's very industrial. It's mainly textiles, and she taught there. And the winters are very hard. They're not quite like Siberia, but they're hard up there. And my mother told me later that one day in the middle of winter, it had been snowing, she saw children coming to school, walking to school through the snow in bare feet. And for the first time, it struck her that there was something wrong with factory workers' children walking to school through snow in bare feet. And I think it struck home with her, so like it would, you know. It's a bit like a young person now seeing footage from Gaza of a dead baby, almost. You know, it's not as graphic as that, and it's not as horrible as that. This is only walking to school through the snow, but it was enough to politicize my mother and for her to go, there is something wrong with this system, and I need to be part of it, whatever. And then, of course, you know, so that was that. And then my father and the war, and my father was killed and blah, 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 blah. But my mother was still a card-carrying member of the British Communist Party until 1956, where everybody left. Because the British Communist Party refused to condemn the Russian invasion of Budapest. Which is what it was, and the putting down of whatever there was some kind of a popular, at least that's how it seemed to those of us who weren't there in Budapest. So an awful lot of people left the CP in England in 1956. Boom. Suddenly they're members of the Labour Party. And so she was still politicised, and still our front room was full of committee meetings constantly. And that was sort of all right when I was growing up for a number of reasons, not least because in the aftermath of the Second World War, with the Labour government, Clement Attlee's government in 1945-46, suddenly Churchill wasn't there anymore, and there was a Labour government and the Beveridge Report, and we had a health service, which was the crown jewel in an idea of a new Britain where children did not walk to school in bare feet through the snow. So the idea of having health, just that one thing, was symbolic of what appeared to me as a small child as being this is a new beginning. Now we can put our imperial past behind us, and we can learn whatever we learned about fascism from the Second World War, and about communism, and blah 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 blah. And for a minute, it looked as if it might be working. And more than a minute. So those years you're talking about, I was busy getting on with trying to become a guitar player or a songwriter or those things. So after my teen years of being the chairman of the Young Socialists in Cambridge and the chairman of the Young Youth Movement for Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, both of which things I were, I then went up to London and went to college and started trying to play the guitar, and they sort of got pushed into a back role, but they were always here, and they were always here, you know. But I sort of, through the 60s and 70s, didn't notice the subversion of the dream, not even in 68, when we were all in Grosvenor Square, you know, being kicked to pieces by the police on horseback, or when all the students in the Sorbonne were throwing cobblestones at the cops. These were all different resistance movements in young people in the West. This is what was going on in Russia. I have no idea. Let us not be in any under illusions. As far as I know, the things that you disapproved of when you were a young man, I'm sure were worth disapproving of. The USSR was autocratic, as far as I can tell, reading what history I have read of it. And that autocracy was dangerous, and people died. And how many, I don't know. I don't speak Russian. I always say this to people. I always say this. I can read the translations of Mr. Putin's speeches, and I do read them, so I can tell he's not criminally insane. I can tell that he's got an IQ way above room temperature. This is a clever bloke. He's articulate, and he makes sense, as does your foreign minister, Mr. Lavrov, who I've listened to a lot as well. The leaders in America don't make any sense at all of any kind ever. They just, every time they open their mouths, and that goes for the two presidential candidates now, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, they are both infants. You couldn't imagine two more infantile people running for the highest office. I'm sorry to chuckle, but it's insane what has been allowed to happen there. So, together, though unwittingly, I think for most of the people of the United States of America they have sold their country to the highest bidder. So they now have to sit around listening to the likes of Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and the other lunatics who now wield huge amounts of power because they control a lot of social media, but also because they're enormously wealthy, and they're going to get wealthier and wealthier because whatever happens in the election, they're going to keep cutting taxes for the immensely wealthy, and they're going to make that divide between the immensely wealthy and everybody else, bigger and bigger and bigger. Until what? Until the Third World War happens.
Maybe.
And then everybody can go and, you know, live in the woods and kill each other, and they'll all say, you see, we were right. Thank goodness we've got our AR-15s. So we can kill our neighbors, the few neighbors we've got who are left alive. It can be a nice free-for-all with everybody killing everybody else. And you go, ooh, well, could we please educate at least one generation of children so that they even faintly comprehend the context of Karl Marx, you know, or Vladimir, or Lenin, or any of the other, or Bertrand Russell, or any of the other intelligent, coherent, philosophical minds of the last 2,000 or 3,000 years, maybe, rather than just going, no, we've got this figured out. Well, but they're not, and so it's very hard, is it not, Dmitry, to wake up in the morning and think, oh my God, they're going to have a presidential election on November the 5th in the United States, and it's a complete farce, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows it's a complete farce, except, of course, as a proportion of the electorate who don't understand that it's a complete farce and who think that their vote means something.
You see,
So that